Majority Report with Sam Seder.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Tuesday, November 13th, 2018. My name is Sam Seder. This is the five-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, Professor of Political Science at George Washington University, John Sides, co-author of Identity Crisis, the 2016 presidential campaign and the battle for meaning of America. Also on the program today, the blue wave got a little wavier. Kristen Sinema declared the winner in Arizona as the Republican candidate refuses to pretend that there was voter fraud there. Meanwhile, speaking of fraud, Matt Whitaker's appointment faces a new court challenge as he is pretending to be acting Attorney General. Rick Scott, speaking of pretending again about voter fraud, tries to end the recount in Florida but fails. Meanwhile, in Georgia, a judge orders a halt to the election certification so that provisional ballots may be reviewed. Reports are Trump going to fire Christian Nielsen, wants Chris Kobach. Meanwhile, Jerome Corsi and Roger Stone think they'll be indicted today. We should be so lucky. Democrats announce their early legislative agenda, and it's smart. Meanwhile, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez calls for more stringent requirements on Amazon's invasion of Queens. Trump re-ups his covering for Mohammed bin Salman, and Gavin McInnes is having a tough time in Larchmont. All this and more on today's program, ladies and gentlemen. Sorry for the slight delay today in the beginning of the show. Having all sorts of technical difficulties, and it's there's really nothing that irritates me more. If it goes past like an hour's worth of technical difficulties, then I think it's basically my whole day is shot. So
there's one other thing that irritates you more, if I may.
Well, that's possibly true. Dishonoring
white women.
That's a reference to a call that we had yesterday. This interview is going to be fascinating today. There was just a couple of just general statistics that I just was unaware of, and this dynamic that the argument that this book makes in terms of what Barack Obama and Donald Trump did to what identity was activated by people in terms of race is fascinating. I'll explain that more when we get into the show. But as we speak, the votes are being recounted in Florida. Very close in the Senate race, a little bit less so in the governor's race, but obviously close enough for a recount. It's unclear to me how it's going to work in terms of the recount with the Senate at this point. I can't quite tell if it's going to be a machine recount, and if the machine recount brings it down to a certain level, then it becomes a hand recount. Conceivably, that could happen in the governor's race, too. Seems unlikely. But there is a certain amount of undervotes for the Senate race in Broward County. And I've seen two forms of speculation. One is that it was a flaw in the ballot design, so people missed voting for the Senate. The second was that there was a flaw in the ballot design and the machine missed recording that people had voted for it. So we'll see. I mean, it feels, at the very least, it feels that the Democrats are slightly more prepared for this. It's absurd that there could ever be any voting problems in Florida again after 2000. Right? I mean, this would be like, we're going to build another bad levee in New Orleans. That's up next.
Careful what you wish for.
So people went back, and there was a documentary called Unprecedented, not to be confused with Cliff Schecter's podcast. And it was the 2000 presidential election documentary that looked at the voting irregularities in West Palm Beach. And somebody went back, watched it, saw a recognizable individual who was interviewed at the time. At that time, he was involved in student government. This is, this is only 18 years ago, I guess.
But when election day came, there were unexpected obstacles.
As the precincts closed later that evening, we began to get reports here in the Student Government Association from just different students about either not having their voter registration card, going to their precinct that they had voted at before, and now being told that they weren't on the roster, that their names have been purged.
Many more irregularities were confirmed when the NAACP held hearings a few days.
Yeah, I'll say. But there it is. Andrew Gillum, at the time involved in student government. That's crazy.
Not a single word about single payer.
There you go.
See the roots of the loss right there.
He did not say a word about single payer.
Not a single word about free college tuition.
There it is. Andrew Gillum, full circle, right?
Ignoring the key issues back then and today.
It is.
Whining about voter suppression.
But it is
and ignoring economic
stunning.
populism.
It is stunning that we still have that we could possibly have election problems in Florida in the same areas. That the laws have not been amended in any way. That if you're up against the deadline, you haven't finished counting votes because there's been screw-ups, that those votes don't count. It's absurd. It's absolutely absurd.
Well,
and
clearly it's working for some people.
Indeed. Let me just finish here. The Democrats have announced their legislative agenda, at least their early one, and they will be introducing legislation to do some things that I actually also mentioned would be a good idea to do. So I may even give myself a little bit of a dab here. The bill would establish automatic voter registration and reinvigorate the Voting Rights Acts. I think you'll recall I was hoping that the Democrats would do that. So this right there.
You can make it a little more enthusiastic.
There we go.
A little upper.
Look.
Kids, wait till
you throw it away. You throw it away.
Sure. Whatever you say.
It would take redistricting power away from state legislatures and give it to independent commissions. It would go on. Other provisions. Overturn Supreme Court's Citizens United ruling. Not quite sure how they could go about doing that, but they could mandate more disclosure of outside money and establish public financing match for small contributions. That to me seems to be fine. But I think basically, they understand. And then there's some ethics issues, too, that seem to be focused on Donald Trump. But you would imagine no one would have a problem with expanding anti-bribery laws. One would imagine. One would probably be wrong, but we'll see. The bottom line, though, however, is that the Democrats are stepping forward with an agenda that does two things. One, because this is not going to pass, right? The Senate is not going to pass this. It's controlled by the Republicans. But it does two things. One, if it was to be passed, it would make structural reforms that would enhance the power of Democrats and their ability to get elected and neutralize, at least to some extent, the ability of Republicans from disenfranchising tens to hundreds of thousands to millions of people across the country and keeping them from voting. That's A. B, what if it does not pass, it's going to force Republican senators to vote against things like fixing the Voting Rights Act, like making it easier to vote, like anti-bribery statutes. It's going to draw some clear lines as to what the Republicans are for and against and what the Democrats are for and against. So it's a smart piece of legislation. I might break it up personally, but I don't know how they're going to introduce it. But they have a large package. They may do it as an omnibus bill, which it makes some votes more difficult for the Republicans. They may not. So we'll see.
Dab on them haters.
There you go. Meanwhile, folks, it is the flu and cold season. Staying properly hydrated is one of the most important factors in recovering from the flu and cold and, frankly, from avoiding it. Thankfully, Liquid IV provides the same hydration as drinking 2 to 3 bottles of water. Liquid IV is not your average electrolyte drink mix. It has 110% daily value of vitamin C and B12. It's non-GMO, clean ingredients, healthy alternative to traditional sports drinks, and it delivers hydration to the bloodstream faster and more efficiently than water does. That's because of chemistry. I think B12 causes like stuff like vitamin C and some of the nutrients to be absorbed quicker. I don't know. I'm not a scientist. I'm not a doctor. With 5 essential vitamins, it has more vitamin C than an orange. It has much potassium as a banana. Whenever I travel now, I grab a handful. I take one on the plane. I take one when I get off the plane. Sometimes I'll do one when I get on the plane. I stay properly hydrated, don't have jet lag, and occasionally when I travel, I will drink a little too much. And so I will drink one that night.
Think it feels good for my tummy. Drink.
I don't even know what that is.
Picturing Sam getting blitzed on a plane. He's trying to start an
I
argument
don't drink alcohol on a plane.
about zero sum with somebody across the aisle.
I love Liquid IV, and I know you will too, as Michael just did my voice when I drink it. Right now, my listeners get 20% off at liquidiv.com. So it's liquid-iv.com. When you use my code majority at checkout, that's 20% off anything you order on Liquid IV's website. Go to liquid-iv.com and enter my promo code majority to get your savings and start getting better hydration. That's liquid-iv.com. Promo code majority. Don't wait. Get hydrated today. Also, support for today's show comes from ThirdLove. Using millions of real women's measurements, ThirdLove designs its bras with breast size and shape in mind for an impeccable fit and incredible feel. All you do is you answer a few simple questions from ThirdLove's Fit Finder quiz to find your perfect fit. ThirdLove offers double the number of sizes that most brands offer, cups A through H, bands up to 48. And with lightweight memory foam cups, straps that won't slip, tagless labels, you want to wear these soft and breathable bras and underwear every day, especially the new cotton t-shirt bras and underwear. Thanks to the 100% fit guarantee, returns and exchanges are free and easy. I have a testimonial about ThirdLove. What, are you 4?
No, I think actually a little, like maybe more like 9.
9. Yeah, I would say 9. Okay, so this is a close friend of mine who tried out the bras. I like they don't have a zillion options, so it's easy to choose something quickly. The fit is great. I usually have to return most bras I order online, even though they're in my size. I ordered 2. Both fit. That almost never happens. I don't have the experience to know if she's just, talking or what, but she says that almost never happens. Super comfortable for an everyday bra, but not as boring as most t-shirt bras. Subtle, cute details, so I don't feel basic. There you go. ThirdLove, folks. They know there's a perfect bra for everyone. So right now, they're offering my listeners 15% off your first order. Go to thirdlove.com/majority now and find your perfect fitting bra. They can get 15% off your first purchase. That's ThirdLove, spelled out thirdlove.com/majority for 15% off today. And lastly, I think you all know that 2018 has been a rather difficult year for human rights. Frankly, 2017, 2016, 2015, we could go on, has not been so great either. But have you ever wondered how rights abuses are documented around the world? You probably have. The sheer volume of global crisis we're seeing, from civilian casualties in Syria to ethnic cleansing in Myanmar to the caging of children on U.S. borders. It's critical we expose the truth in order to defend the rights of all and bring those responsible to justice. Human Rights Watch does just that. I can't tell you how many times on this program I have quoted Human Rights Watch numbers. For this program, and frankly, 15 some odd years I've been doing this. They're an independent, nonprofit organization known for their accurate fact-finding, impartial reporting, and targeted advocacy. Often in partnership with local activists and human rights groups, they accept no money from any government, but rely on the support of informed, dedicated people just like you. So if human rights are important to you, go to hrw.org/majority. Make a donation, support its vital work around the world. That's hrw.org/majority. When you do, not only is your gift tax deductible, it will be matched dollar for dollar until 2019. That means your donation will go twice as far to advance justice and defend the basic dignity of people who need it most. Again, that's hrw.org/majority. It's a great thing to do, to sit down with your kids. And, this, as we enter into sort of like the gift giving season, to sit down with them. And, I'm not going to tell you what to do, but what I do with my kids is we take a night of Hanukkah, and instead of getting a toy, the cash, they get to choose. We look at a couple of charities, charitable organizations. And so a great way to sort of enter into some conversations with kids. hrw.org/majority. All right, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, John Sides. We are back. Sam Seder on the Majority Report on the phone. It is a pleasure to welcome to the program Professor of Political Science at George Washington University, co-author with Michael Tesler and Lynn Vaverick of Identity Crisis, the 2016 Presidential Campaign and the Battle for the Meaning of America. John Sides, welcome to the program.
Thank you so much for having me.
So let's start. This story of the 2016 election really starts closer to 2008, and I want to just start with one fact that just sort of blew me away, was that less than 50% of non-college educated white voters could place the Democrats to the left of the Republicans on the question of which party was more supportive of government assistance, I guess broadly, help for African Americans. Is that right? And what are the implications of that at that time?
What that's showing you is of course, that lots of people just don't pay close attention to politics and don't register features of political parties that to most political observers are well known and have been well known for years, if not decades. The reason that this changes, though, has to do with the presidency of Barack Obama. And in some sense, Barack Obama clarifies the party politics of race. And this helps voters who may have been paying less attention to politics come to realize that the Democratic Party is to the left of the Republican Party on these issues.
That, to me, is stunning because there was plenty of I've seen studies that suggest that I guess the idea of government support becomes racialized right before this, but it's not lined up with the parties until essentially people see that a black guy is the Democratic nominee.
Yeah, especially for voters who had less formal education, the alignment of their partisanship and their racial attitudes really was a feature of the Obama era. And what that did, of course, overall was just to strengthen the correlation in the American population more generally, so that people who have views of immigration that are more favorable or want more immigration, or people that have views of racial inequality that think that it has mostly to do with slavery and discrimination, those people are increasingly Democrats. And if you have a view that is more concerned about the level of immigration and wants to reduce it, or if you have a view of racial inequality that says that it's mostly about blacks not trying hard enough or not working hard enough, then those people are increasingly Republicans. So maybe maybe people are changing their views about immigration to match their partisanship, or maybe they're updating their partisanship to align with their views of race and immigration. But either way, we end up with a country where the standard way that we contest elections, Democrat versus Republican, is now not just a debate about, let's say, how large government should be, which it has been for years and years and years. Now it's a debate about what kind of country we're going to be, how exclusive or inclusive we're going to be toward these different kinds of groups.
And I mean, in some ways, I feel that some of us here, I'm speaking literally in this room, have been guilty of assuming that these things were already racialized, right? I mean, because race has played such an enormous part in our politics. But I guess so the big difference is really just sort of this new level of sorting that's taking place, right? That has been really basically an 8 to 10 year process.
That's absolutely right. I mean, there's no question that racial politics have been endemic in American politics from the founding. But the ways in which people's views about race and their own racial identities align with partisanship is a much more recent phenomenon.
And even like in the context of like the Dixiecrats and whatnot, and LBJ saying we're going to lose the South because of these issues for a decade. He turned out to be a little bit off, but even then, I mean, this is so it all comes down. Let's just start with this. I mean, where do you guys? I mean, tell us about the research that you did that you started to come across this notion. Did you enter into this work with an awareness that this dynamic had taken place?
Yes, I mean, in part because my co-author Michael Tesler had previously written 2 different books about the politics of race during the Obama era, one about his 2008 presidential campaign, and then a second book about not only his presidential campaigns, but his presidency more generally. And we knew this was happening. And there's been a lot of attention in the political science literature to this concept of sorting and to the ways in which Democrats and Republicans, may increasingly differ from each other on a variety of policy issues. But what Michael was able to show in his work on the Obama era was that this sorting came to encompass racial issues as well as more general kinds of ideological issues. However, I think that this more general trend towards sorting may or may not have been as consequential in 2016 had it not been for the 2016 campaign itself. I mean, there was plenty of sorting already underway by 2012, but yet the role of issues like immigration and race in 2016 was clearly greater than in 2012, or that's what our evidence suggests. And that tells you that a lot of it had to do with the specific choices of the candidates in terms of their ideas and messages in 2016 and how those differed from other recent presidential elections.
Okay, so conceptually, to understand this, it's almost as if there was something like a dormant virus embedded in all of us, and the environment in 2012 or 2008 brought that to the fore, and then in 2012, it was a little bit less, the environment was a little bit less stimulating to that virus. And then in 2016, that virus or allergy or however you want to conceptualize it was even magnified because of the context. Is that sort of like conceptually the right way to think about that?
I think that's right. I mean, sometimes we talk about it with kind of an agricultural metaphor, which is, aspects of the Obama era kind of fertilized the soil for more racially charged politics, and that made probably increased the likelihood that that kind of racially charged politics could be potent if the candidates were to really embrace that. And Obama obviously didn't. He was always trying to moderate on questions of race. He didn't talk about it as frequently as some other Democratic presidents. He took very careful positions. McCain and Romney, really did not want to run heavily racialized campaigns and explicitly rejected certain kinds of tactics that might have played the race card in a more explicit way. But of course, for Trump and Clinton, it was a very different kind of election altogether.
All right. Well, let's talk about that in terms of, because my understanding is that Clinton found herself relative from 2008 to 2016, the way that she was perceived on race and as reflected in her supporters almost flipped. Is that right?
Yes. Basically, of course, in 2008, her coalition was built around primarily white voters in the Democratic primaries, and especially white voters who had more conservative views on racial issues. And in 2016, it flips that now her coalition, she gains all this support among African Americans, loses some support among whites overall, and the role of white primary voters' racial attitudes just doesn't really matter as much anymore because there's no African American candidate on the ballot, and Clinton and Sanders are not really different in their own views about racial inequality. So yeah, it was basically a coalition that became the inverse of itself.
So how do you measure this stuff? Because 2008, it's not. We had our first black presidential candidate. We also were coming out of or entering into, the most severe economic event in generations. How do you sort of parse this stuff out? Like, how do you determine what is operative, because I imagine there's a lot of things that go into, the question of who am I going to vote for? How do you parse these out, and how do you determine what is the sort of the driving factor?
Sure. What we did in looking at the 2016 election was we did as many comparisons to recent presidential elections as we could, because we wanted to distinguish what is distinctive about 2016 from what is kind of a chronically important factor in presidential elections. In which case, if it's chronically important, then the story isn't really about 2016. It's just a broader story about American presidential elections. One of the ways that we did this was with a unique survey that interviewed the same group of voters first in the 2012 election. We talked to them in December 2011, so almost a year before they voted. And we talked to them in November 2012 after they had voted, and we asked them, did you vote Obama or did you vote Romney? And then 4 years later, right after the 2016 election, we were able to re-interview those same voters. And so we could see, how they voted in both elections and who shifted from Obama to Trump or from Romney to Clinton. And we could compare the relative impact of their views about a variety of different issues that we had measured way back in 2011, well before, both campaigns, but especially 2016. And we found that it was these things about race and immigration that although in some cases they certainly appeared to correlate strongly with your choice between Obama and Romney, that those correlations increased in 2016. Other factors didn't necessarily show that same pattern.
How do you, what are the type of questions that you ask to make that determination where you pull it apart?
Very good question. So we can break up a couple different topics. Take racial inequality. We're asking people whether they agree or disagree with a series of statements. And the statements are designed to get at, do you attribute racial inequality to structural forces like discrimination, or do you attribute it to the fact that, to your belief that blacks don't work hard enough? So generations of slavery and discrimination have made it difficult for blacks to get ahead. That's, do you agree or disagree? Or you may ask them, it's just a question of trying harder. If blacks would only try hard enough, they could be as well off as whites. Do you agree or disagree? So we asked those kinds of questions to measure views of immigration. It's the three questions that we had in the survey when we first did it in 2011 were, do you want to increase or decrease immigration? Do you want to, or keep it the same? And then do you support a path to citizenship for undocumented immigrants? And then thirdly, do you think that undocumented immigrants are a benefit or drain on society? So, we combine these questions together to get, kind of indexes or scales that measure people's views on these issues. To do one more example, where there's a lot of discussion about the role of economics and economic anxiety. And so in both 12 and 16, this is now in a different survey project, but a really nice battery of questions. How worried are you about losing your job? How likely is it that you're not going to be able to make a mortgage or rent payment in the coming months, or not be able to make a health care payment? Several questions of that nature. So really designed to get at the what I think people really thought were the driving insecurities, even after 8 years of economic recovery since the recession. And we just found that those economic anxiety measures really didn't strongly correlate with your vote in either election, 12 or 16, and didn't correlate more strongly in 16 than 12.
Were there significant differences in the way that people answered those questions? So you're asking the same people in 2011 that you are in 2016. Do their answers change at all? Did you see any, did people become more or less, express more or less, I guess, racist views, or, however you want to?
Sure, very good question. Overall, no. There aren't really big shifts in people's overall views about immigration or race or things like that. One of the metaphors that we use to illustrate this, sometimes people talk about Trump's victory or the success of right-wing populist parties in European countries as a wave. It's a wave of populist sentiment. But if by populist sentiment you mean things like concern about immigration, there is no wave. It's not that the public was becoming less open to immigration, and that's what Trump was able to ride to victory. What we would say is that public opinion on questions like race and immigration and other issues is really more like a reservoir. There's a range of sentiments from positive to negative or favorable to unfavorable. And the question is, are those sentiments going to be mobilized and therefore become more powerfully predictive of people's choices? And again, that's where the decisions of the candidates come in.
So it's and let me ask the same question about the economic anxiety measures.
Sure.
Was there any movement from 2011 to 2016?
Yeah, the American public became less economically anxious, which again it's a mystery to me why this was so undercovered going into the 2016 election. But there have been 50 years of survey data that ask people things like, how are your personal finances doing? Are they getting better or worse? What about the national economy? Do you think it's getting better or worse? What about in a year from now? Do you think you'll be better then or worse off then? The standard battery of questions showed pretty clearly that the public was getting more economically confident. And again, this is just tracking the actual the recovery from the recession. It's not to suggest that every problem had been solved,
right?
But in terms of what the public was seeing, it clearly reflected a belief that the economy was getting better. And what's been remarkable to me is that since Trump's gotten elected, there's much more news coverage now about the economic recovery, the growth rate, the unemployment rate, people's positive views. Now the question is, why isn't the positive economy helping Trump or helping the Republican Party? But if you look at people's actual views about the economy, they're only a little bit better than they were in 2016. So again, I think in some sense the popular impression of the campaign really missed the boat on what was happening in public opinion overall.
And was that improved perspective on the economy, was that equally distributed across different income levels and wealth levels and all different sort of subgroups that you would look at?
Very good question. So the answer is yes. That you can segment the public based on how much formal education they have. You can segment them based on their income level. And the trends are moving in parallel. So every group, every educational group and income group is becoming more favorable about the economy. And in fact, the ironic thing about the comparisons across the income groups is that during the Obama years, there were actually fewer differences between the wealthiest and the least wealthy Americans in their views of the economy. So in some sense, the income differences shrank during Obama, far from it being the case that they were growing because the wealthy people thought the economy was doing much better, but the poor people thought it wasn't. The only really thing that differentiates people's perceptions of the economy overall is just partisanship. And, Democrats and Democratic-leaning people were much more likely to perceive that economic growth than Republicans because the Republicans didn't want to give credit to a Democratic president. And this kind of partisan bias in economic perceptions is a pretty chronic feature of contemporary American politics. So if you wanted to find the really angry people or the so-called economically anxious people, it was really Republicans tired of being out of the White House for 8 years. It wasn't due to social class or income or anything like that.
And much of your research suggests that race or that party becomes a surrogate for racial questions. Is that right? I mean, is that
yes?
Okay, so yeah, so explain that to us.
The party becomes a surrogate for
the racial views that you have. That the more things become racialized. I mean, so just even getting back to the immigration point you were making. People had the same feelings towards immigration. It's just that they didn't realize they could express them in the political arena. Is that like a way of conceiving it?
I may maybe put it slightly differently. I mean, they express them. I mean, they'll tell you their views. I mean, at least if you believe survey data. But again,
but you can't act on them. You can actually act on them within the context of politics, and they didn't understand that before?
Well, I mean, I think from the standpoint of social science, right? There's a lot of different ingredients that can go into my choice between a Democratic and Republican candidate. And we know that partisanship is always going to be a factor, and it was a strong factor in 2016, as it has been in previous elections. But the question is, other factors. Well, it depends, right? It depends on, first of all, what are the candidates talking about? Are you getting enough information to think that this is an important issue? What positions are the candidates taking? If they're taking the same position, then it doesn't really help you choose to think about that issue because they're not, they're carbon copies of each other. So again, what I think makes a difference for voters is to see, first of all, a lot of discussion about an issue, which brings it to the top of your head and makes it a more salient part of your thinking, and then to see the candidates sharply differ on that question. And so what you saw in 2016 that was different than 2012 or 2008 was both this sort of extraordinary emphasis on all of these issues tied to race, ethnicity, and immigration, and also very, very sharp differences between Trump's positions, of course, which attracted controversy for the entire duration of the campaign, and Clinton's positions, which we argue were to the left of Obama's, probably, and more generally, of course, she was structuring her entire campaign in many ways as a rejection of Trump. And so I think if you were a voter, now you had a very clear contrast on an issue that was being discussed more frequently than it had been. So that's what makes your own views about immigration now become activated and a more important influence on your choice.
I see. So as I grow older, I may think that, tax deductions for mortgages on homes are more important than I did when I was, 22, I guess. But in this instance, it is outside of me. That remains a constant, and suddenly the candidates are talking about tax deductions on home mortgages and how important they are, and I may become more attuned to it at an earlier age, just for example.
Yeah, and it's not to say that people don't make choices based on factors that are, kind of intrinsic or idiosyncratic to them.
Right.
I certainly also care a lot more about the mortgage interest deduction than I did 20 years ago. And it's not to say that we can reduce people's choices in 2016 or any election to one factor or one set of factors. But what I would typically say, again, is if we want to see what is distinctively important about voting behavior in one election as opposed to other elections, right, that a lot of that's going to depend on the choices and the messages of the candidates.
And this was one of those things that was different than the other, essentially, is what stuck out. And so, all right, let's talk about Muslims, because during the Bush administration, we've actually had in the past couple of years, and maybe really, I mean, I think you know this, I mean, during the Obama years, it was sort of, it was upsetting, but also fascinating to see that during the close proximity temporally to 9/11 did not provide more hate attacks against Muslims. It was really, as we got further out, it was basically Obama in some way energized Islamophobia. Is that what your data shows? I certainly feel like I experienced that way.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that Michael Tesler talks about in his work on the Obama era in particular is that views of Muslims became more associated with views of Obama than was true for other candidates or that had been true in the past. And part of this probably reflects the idea that some people perceived Obama himself or suspected he was a Muslim. And we could show in the chapter that this may help explain why Democratic and Republican voters are now further apart in their views of Muslims and Islam than they once were. So in some sense, Islam and Muslims is another issue on which the parties are now better sorted. But then again, here comes 2016 and shows that we can have a campaign that activates your underlying views of Muslims more so than was true even in the Obama era. And this, of course, is largely due to the fact that Trump targeted Muslims for, and suggested we needed new policies to deal with travel and to deal with homeland security. And, he's widely criticized for those views, including within his own party. But again, it makes the contrast between him and Clinton starker, and it brings that issue to the forefront of people's minds in ways that it might not have been.
Let's talk about the sort of the how Trump acted upon those from, I guess, the center to the left, sort of in an inverse way to Obama. I mean, so if Obama basically activated people's pre-existing racial biases and Islamophobia, Trump has sort of done the opposite for people who had maybe a reservoir of less discriminatory. How would you express that?
Well, I think what you're pointing to is a really important trend that's happened during, but especially since the 2016 campaign. And what we've observed in public polling data is a remarkable leftward shift of Democrats on these issues. Really, I mean, in a very short amount of time, 2 to 3 years, we're talking about 15-point or even 20-point increases in the percentage of Democrats who, express a favorable view of immigrants, increases in the percentage of Democrats who attribute racial inequality to discrimination. We're also seeing, I think, a similar sort of partisan difference in views of Islam. It's always the case that public opinion reacts against presidents. I mean, it's kind of a chronic feature. The president sort of tries to shift policy in one direction, and the public goes in the other direction, almost as a reaction. But what's happened, in particular under Trump, is a shift on these issues that are the bread and butter of his presidency, which are the ones that have to do with race and immigration. And that's done is it's pushed Democrats and Republicans even farther apart. Now the parties are even better sorted than they were. And so, in the aggregate, it looks like Americans are turning against Trump. But in what that conceals is that it's mostly the movement of Democrats. And so that's kind of what makes the identity crisis that we use in the title of the book even more intense, because now you can really see even more reasons why there could be intense partisan conflict on these issues.
So how much, I mean, if there was some type of baseline, right, if we're starting at zero and the Obama pushes or activates, however you want to contemplate that, the sort of the racial biases of certain people, I want to say on the right, but, it's also some Democrats too, right? But on the right, I guess, of the racial scale, how much further did they move from zero relative to Democrats moving the other direction from zero? Do you know what I'm saying? Like we're creating more polarization, but
Yep.
Both parties, if there are two separate parties here, are moving to their respective corners. What was the distance that they traveled to those corners? Yeah,
that's a very good question. And actually, now I have to retreat into a very sort of carefully caveated social science kind of answer. It depends on the specific kinds of questions that you're looking at, whether Democrats have moved farther to the left or Republicans have moved farther to the right. I think on questions of immigration, I think the movement of the Democratic Party has been more notable and perhaps sharper. But I think if you looked at other questions, depending on the exact polling question you're looking at, you might see the opposite pattern, or you might see roughly parallel kinds of movements. So both parties are moving a similar distance. For that reason, I think we're fairly careful in not trying to say that this sorting or polarization is primarily due to movement in one party or the other. I think it's some of both, and which one looks to be moving further really just depends.
Do you have a list of like what policies have become racialized for both corners, as it were?
I mean, anything that, almost anything that is connected to African Americans, connected to immigration, will show these partisan differences.
Well, I mean, I know the differences, but I mean, because it seems like what happened was under Obama, like we started off with, you had whites without a college education come to realize that certain programs were associated with with black people, and their attitudes, their racial attitudes kick in, and they say, well, I don't want to be I don't want to vote for a Democrat because I didn't realize that's where my money's going to. I get the sense under Trump, for instance, like that housing for the right has become even more racialized. And maybe it happened during Obama, but I get the feeling it was more racialized, and that I don't necessarily see the left as conscious about housing as a racial issue. I mean, do you have a sense of questions like that? I mean, maybe it is. I don't know, but that's just I'm just trying to sort of draw a distinction there to see if there's anything in your data, in your research that suggests dynamics along those lines.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I think exemplifies what you're talking about is something that we refer to as racialized economics. And it's the idea that people are thinking about economic outcomes and then therefore like the government policies that affect people's economic outcomes through a racial lens. So it's not that I'm economically insecure and therefore I vote this way or that way. The really more potent perception is that my group, typically defined in terms of race and ethnicity, is losing out to those other racial groups who are getting unfair help and are not playing by the rules. And so a lot of government policies then become viewed as a sort of implicitly racial policies if they're perceived as helping undeserving people get ahead. And I think typically, especially for means-tested programs, housing, sure, if we're talking about like federal housing assistance for the poor, or if we're talking about any kind of social program that primarily seeks to benefit lower-income Americans, the risk is always in American politics that these policies are viewed as essentially, primarily benefiting racial and ethnic minorities who, are just living off the government and not working hard enough and trying hard enough on their own. And I think something about, certainly nothing about the 2016 campaign, changed this in any form or fashion as far as I could tell. I feel like there was still this sort of constant division, particularly in Trump's rhetoric between, the us, the good people, and the them. And the them often had an implicitly or explicitly racial or religious character. And so, again, to the extent that we're going to frame government policies in those terms, it's going to be, of course, increasingly difficult to reach any kinds of, agreement on those policies.
And when we're talking in generalities, but specifically, it's like white people saying, I don't want people of color to get this stuff, right? I mean, it doesn't quite go the other way.
Some of the interesting ethnographic work that was done, and even this is before the 2016 election, definitely talking to certain groups of white Americans found exactly that perception. So one book that got a lot of attention a couple of years ago was by a sociologist named Arlie Russell Hochschild called Strangers in Their Own Land. And she went to rural Louisiana and she talked to folks there. And what she found was that they had a story that they kind of was embedded in their consciousness. And the story was, in a metaphorical sense, is I'm in line to get what I deserve, and I've worked hard, and I've played by the rules. But look what's happening up ahead of me in line. Hey, who are those people? They're cutting in line. These are African Americans who benefited from affirmative action, or these are undocumented immigrants that wouldn't wait their place, and came into the country anyway. And so I think one of the challenging things that comes out of the 2016 election, but it's clearly endemic in a lot of people's political attitudes, especially among whites, is that there's always a zero-sum game here, where I'm doing the right thing and I'm not getting ahead, and the reason I'm not getting ahead is because they're taking it from me. And I think one of the nothing about the 2016 campaign makes this any better. And one of the real challenges about having a more racialized politics going forward is to try to figure out a way that we can have conversations around issues like this without having them inevitably viewed as a competition between different racial groups.
What if, what if the solution to that is to just make sure there's no line? Like, what if, would these people, if these people were feeling like I'm not in line, I got to the front because it turns out there was no line. It was just like one very wide window where everybody could just walk up and get it. Do we have a sense of what would happen in that instance?
Yeah, it's a politics that's difficult to convey.
It's universal, right? It's not. It's a universality. Like, this is available to everyone. We're not going to ask you.
That's why the politics of Social Security and Medicare are somewhat different, because those are, universal benefits for seniors. But of course, it's impossible to make all these. It's a challenge to make all these benefits universal. And so I think. Basically what I think is important is to make clear that I think my version of what you're saying, there's no line, is to say that to people, and this is what politicians have to try to communicate, that the challenges that you feel that you're facing are not because of other groups. That's not who you should be attributing your own challenges to. We have to find a way to sort of sever this perception that maybe I'm not getting ahead the way I want to, or I'm not achieving what I want to achieve, from this perception that the reason for that has to be those undeserving groups over there. If we can sort of sever that link, that would be helpful in terms of, I think, of changing the way that we have conversations in and around economic security and government social policies.
I wonder if it's even if it's possible for humans ever to not blame someone else for what they feel they don't have, or they haven't gotten that they deserve. I guess the argument about that that we heard, I think particularly in the context of like the Clinton and Sanders race, was sort of centered around this idea that, like, well, you can try and sever that cause, that a sense that it's the fault of immigrants that you're not getting this, or it's the fault of black people that you're not getting this, or you can just try and give everybody more so that they don't even have to blame anybody. Putting aside whether or not it is feasible from a practical standpoint, I'm talking from a hypothetical standpoint.
Sure.
Just in terms of social attitudes. If one is addressing who I'm going to blame, the other is addressing the beef. Right?
Yep. I think that offers an avenue. I think you're right, to having a different kind of conversation around these issues. Of course, the risk, the challenge, it seems to me, is that kind of Bernie Sanders universal argument. The question is, again, whether that's going to be met with a demagogic appeal, that's going to portray a universal policy as fundamentally a secret handout. Because my observation about the way that these debates unfold is that oftentimes, even policies that might have real benefits for, let's say, lower-income white people get portrayed as fundamentally policies that benefit African Americans or other racial and ethnic minority groups. So the question is, can you win with a universalist argument if you have to match it up against that counter argument? And that's like a real challenge. But I would say that one of the things that we talk about at the very end of the book, we have this somewhat glimmer of optimistic note, but it's really just a glimmer. Is we talk about the fact that some of the racialized politics that we observed in 2016 was due to the choices of the candidates and to the choices of political leaders more generally. And so if we're going to have any kind of politics where some of these issues, I don't know what you'd say, there's just a de-escalation, right? So that it doesn't feel so emotionally charged and fraught. It's going to have to come from political leaders making different kinds of appeals and finding ways to articulate, policy attitudes and policy proposals that don't stoke this kind of group competition. So, I mean, if it's going to change, it's going to change in part because politicians decide they want to do it differently. I'm not confident that's going to happen anytime soon.
Well,
but that's what we think. That's what we think. That's one of the things that we think was really what made 2016 distinctive, and it's what might make a subsequent election not quite as fraught as 2016. If
I was looking at your book and I had the ability to choose, and I don't want to, I know this is sort of maybe an unfair question, but it'll be the last one, and you can. But if I was looking at these attitudes and seeing what your data says, that maybe like the Obama to Trump voters were at the very least, in part pushed by this notion of Clinton's talking about race more than Obama did, and Trump is speaking to my pre-existing biases, and I'm going to go that way. Demographically, would it be how risky? How much has things changed? Where it would be that if an African American went up against Trump, like what would that look like? Would it be a function of because Obama was less racial in terms of what his programmatically, at least what he would rhetorically than Clinton. So maybe that's not fair, but to put it that way, but it did. Just the existence of a black guy drove the Trump base sort of, I don't want to say crazy, but more crazy. So what?
So the question is ultimately, could this change?
Well, I mean, have attitudes changed enough that maybe we're past that danger point, or or are things? I mean, did we see some of that play out maybe in races in 2016, in 2018? I mean, where are we in terms of the American public relative to our susceptibility to these new factors, i.e., a guy like Trump coming out and getting highly racialized, and an African American who doesn't?
That's a very good question. I'm not going to give you a very optimistic answer. I don't know that we've gotten. I don't know that we've sort of passed the maximum level that we could imagine in terms of the racialization of our politics, or having a more emotionally charged politics around issues like race and immigration. I thought maybe we had maxed it out in 2012 and 2008 because we had an African American on the ticket, but it turns out that we didn't. In 2016, it was even more so. And 2018, same thing. We did some analysis that looked at voters in 2018 compared to 2014, 2012, and their views of immigration were now more strongly related to how they voted for Congress than they were in those two prior elections. So this is happening even in a midterm year when Trump's not on the ballot. So part of me is not sure that we're going to be able to back away from this anytime soon, given what the nature of Trump's views and the way he's basically, I assume, going to continue to run his presidency and candidacy. And based on my perceptions of where Democrats are going to come from in opposing him, I think the contrasts are going to be pretty stark. So, that's not the most optimistic note to end an interview on, but it really feels to me like the conditions are still quite ripe for a continuation of what we would call the identity crisis.
John Sides, thank you so much. Fascinating work. Congratulations on it. The book is Identity Crisis, the 2016 Presidential Campaign and the Battle for the Meaning of America. We'll put a link to that at majority.fm. Thanks again for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thanks so much, Sam. I appreciate it, too.
Bye-bye. All right, folks.
So it's Obama's fault.
It was Obama's fault. Thanks, Obama.
Thanks for the research.
I mean, it's interesting. I remember, can't remember the name of the author now. He was a law professor at Harvard. He had written a book about Randall Kennedy. And I can't remember the name of the book off the top of my head. But his argument was all about how Obama was constrained by his race to talk about things about race. And I think there's maybe some indication that at least from this data that, maybe had he gotten more racialized. Like, you get the sense that the reason why some voters who could go from Obama to Trump were like, well, I liked Obama because he talked about personal responsibility all the time. And now Hillary's just blaming white people for it. I mean, that seems to be at least, part of the dynamic that was going on, at least in the context of this book. But there does, it is an interesting question as to whether or not you could say if people are worried that other people are cutting in front of them in line. If there was no line and everybody just had it dropped on them, maybe they would have a different.
That's the strongest point that people like Adolph Reed, I think that people he's still totally right in his critique of representational neoliberalism. And the only point that people are getting caught up in is really just debating the Trump vote. I don't think there's any contradiction between accepting that, of course, it's driven by racial, sexual, social backlash, and I still maintain that alongside specific issues, of course, to address. Maybe that's the argument people want to have. If you want to have an argument about whether there's a specific conversation and policy set dealing with race, then maybe that's a genuine argument. And I would say, yes, there absolutely has to be. But I also still maintain that universal programs are both the right thing to do and will go some ways on this stuff.
Well, I mean, that's the argument, right? Is that you're not going to cure people of their racism. You're just going to have it less activated in their life because they're not going to have enough things to blame people for.
Well, that's true. And there is some, my understanding of even the 60s is that part of the reason that sometimes some people were a bit more willing to move in the right direction on some aspects of social emancipation was because they were doing really well.
I mean, I know that, I don't go around cursing you, for instance, until there's something happens with my computer. And I'm like, what did Michael do? And so it activates. I
was actually amazed by your growth today that you didn't whine and bitch at me about your computer problems. You know what?
Well,
that's a good example.
That's what I'm saying.
Oh, you did. So you were having a delusional episode. But what was good was that you were actually blaming the guy that messed up your computer, which is where the real enemy is,
right?
Versus your fucked up transference on me. So that was growth.
Well, before you came in, I had done that.
Well, I'm sure you still will have your little tantrums, but like the white electorate, we can work.
Oh, that's such a good analogy.
Yeah,
that is a great analogy. Sam is totally the white electorate of this office.
It's your fault. It's your fault.
Computer guys,
everybody's against me.
All right,
Can
folks.
someone get me Advil?
Everything's tailored to him, but everything's against him. You are the white electorate of the office. That is amazing.
There you go.
Total white electorate.
Okay, don't get too carried away.
Keep going.
Don't get too carried away.
Sorry.
All right, folks. We're going to head into the fun half. Just a reminder. Oh, do we have any announcement today? We do. Oh. All right, so we have an announcement, ladies and gentlemen. Do I have a piece of paper? I have a piece of paper. On January 13th, it is exactly 2 months from today, on a Sunday, at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Time, we will be doing a live Majority Report show as part of the Brooklyn Pod Fest. And, of course, we're obligated to do it where all the other podcast live shows are, at the Bell House. Is that right? Yes. And so are tickets on sale now? The link is up. The link is on the blog post right now. How much are the tickets? $15. We're undercutting all the other shows. Is that right? Michael, what is
Oh,
it?
yeah, you're definitely undercutting my show.
There you go.
But my show's going to be better.
Well, Michael's show was going to be better.
No, actually, you should go to both shows. That's awesome. What's funny is I did not know that this was happening until you told me like the other day, but I'm excited. Are we having, is it just going to be us, or are we having guests? Have you decided that yet?
I'm starting to lean towards no guests, but maybe guests.
I think some people would like just Majority Report.
Maybe
show,
guests. Maybe we'll do like a quick, maybe we'll do like a, I don't know, fun guest. Who knows? I mean, January 13th, who knows what's going to be going on then, right? I mean, but your tickets are $15, and it's a live show. How many does it seat? How many people seat in there? 300 people?
No, it's 350. Excuse
350.
me. I think 350. Yeah.
350. So get your seats now. It's 18 and over. We're allowing the kids in, So check it out.
That's exciting. That's a big advantage.
Yeah.
Because of the time. I'm sorry to 18-year-olds who've asked. It's a night show.
Sunday afternoon. So it's not as alcohol oriented. Of course, you need to be a little bit. You need to drink a little bit and enjoy Michael's the Michael Brooks show. Folks. Just a reminder. That
was a joke.
This program. Oh, what is this?
This kind of goes with what we were talking about today. This is I'm trying to look for the source of this writer, but this is but she ended up voting for DeSantis, partially because she wanted to see an end to racial divisions. In Cooper's eyes, tension between races in Madison only worsened after Obama's election in 2008. Black neighbors just started seeing everything differently, she said. They seemed consumed with Obama as the first black president and less concerned about how he was affecting the economy in Florida. That trickled down to everything, she said. Now everyone is so worried about the other race. She said she felt that a vote for Gillum, who had accused DeSantis of using a racist slur after he warned Florida's on TV to not monkey up the state, would worsen those tensions.
Yeah. So there you go.
Yep.
Exactly right.
Big tension.
I mean, this, this is like, it's all part of that sort of dynamic. The loss of privilege feels like oppression. And, this is, I mean, Obama'd up everything. Not like Trump. Trump, he just stays in his compartment.
Yeah,
he doesn't
Trump doesn't instigate at all.
Himself into the rest of your life.
Does not instigate.
Obama was like every day, every minute.
Obama's
What
like,
Obama time is it? What
that was
Obama
a stupid
time?
question. Where are you from?
I'm going to
CNN. Fake
I'm gonna
news.
take
That's the fake news.
Take the Obama
It's the white news. We call it
the white news. We call it the white news. Call it the devil news. Devil news. Sit down, devil news. Sit down, devil news. You're a very rude person, even by devil standards. Get back to your cave, Jakob.
That is a very good snapshot of some people's extremely irrational thought patterns. And this seems to be a trend.
Oh, look, it's a racist white woman. Racist white woman.
That's
was
one
the
of the
stupidest questions I've ever heard in my life.
That was in the Washington Post, by the way. Election results in Florida and Georgia prompt soul searching for African Americans. For African Americans.
Yeah.
How are white people going to soul search when they don't have any?
Maybe it was a little bit early for us to want political representation. Maybe we should think about that.
Well, on a more sober, depressing note, do you remember there was a moment? I recall this vividly, actually, because I was studying Pakistan at the time. And in 2007, right in the Democratic primaries, I don't remember precisely when, Benazir Bhutto was assassinated in Pakistan. And it was like it got an unusual amount of coverage, I would say, in the United States for an event like that. And it didn't last, but there was a slight tremor in the polls or news reporting out of South Carolina of African-American voters being like, essentially just that the image of a politician being assassinated made them concerned and anxious about the vote for Obama. So there's no, I mean, I think that kind of calculus.
The reason why Iowa was so important for Obama was prior to that, he did not have he had a significant support in the black community, but certainly there was major splits in the black community because they thought that he could not win. And I think there was also fears for the thought was there's no way this country is going to let a black guy be president. And it wasn't until he won Iowa where I think people started to believe that he could win.
Got a green light from the honkies.
There you go.
Yeah, remember
Devil country voted for me.
Remember when Hillary implied she wasn't going to stop campaigning because someone might shoot Obama?
Yes, I do.
That was quite the moment.
That was, yeah.
You know, when MLK and Bobby Kennedy, when they all get clipped, there's an LBJ waiting around. Subtext.
Failing to prepare is preparing to fail.
All right.
I care way too much about black people. Let this black guy win.
Your support makes this show possible, folks. You can become a member by going to jointhemajority.report.com. Every one of your support is appreciated and extremely helpful as we can keep buying new computers that don't have Wi-Fi connections. So
upgrade to Wi-Fi.
Yeah. We're going to get this Wi-Fi. Actually, the big upgrade is we're going to actually get it tethered to an Ethernet cable. We're going back to wired.
Analog MR.
Here we go.
That is where things are going to go.
Pretty soon, we're going to move this whole show to recording it on a cassette tape and mailing it to you. So get ready for that, folks. In the meantime, jointhemajority.report.com. Also, don't forget justcoffee.coop, fair trade coffee, tea, or chocolate. Use the coupon code majority, get 10% off.
Sorry. Do you remember? I hope that whoever did this, I'm not hurting, and obviously I don't even remember their name. But do you remember how they used to? The sound quality of our interviews have undoubtedly drastically improved over the last couple of years.
I'm trying to upgrade it.
Do you remember that one guy though emailed us and he was like, "It's a big problem listening to the sound qualities in your otherwise great interviews. And what you should do, and I'll help invest money towards this, is you should buy a microphone and send it to your guest, and then they can send it to the next guest." He had this scheme that we would buy an MR mic for each of our guests, and the guests would just mail it to each other like across the.
What we ended up doing instead of that was, of course,
he was not messing with us.
To hire someone to actually transport the mic personally. So we have constantly I can't even remember that guy's name anymore. He's just out there, just like flying around with a microphone. Yeah, but he's always a day late.
Mike, the mic delivery.
He's
guy.
always a day late. That's what the sad part is. He shows up and they're like, "I did it yesterday." He's always one day.
That was just the most awesome email though, because the guy really went into he's like, and then what will happen is the following guest will receive.
He really got upset with the quality of some interview.
The problem is most people don't have landlines, and to the extent they do, it's those VoIP things, and they're horrible. So, like when we have Ben Dixon on, he's set up to do this.
Oh yeah,
he sounds great. But some people sound better than others. But meanwhile, today is Tuesday, Michael, and it's almost Tuesday night already. So what's happening?
Jabali will be joining us. I would say an interesting counterpoint and potential synthesis coming out of this conversation, and echoing the Sunday show, which is Unlocked with Bill Fletcher Jr., which everybody should check out. Maleka Jabali on the color of economic anxiety. And we're also going to be doing, as part of a preview for a larger one for patrons, a little bit of a mini illicit history of the 2000 Florida election and what's happening today, and how voter suppression fits into the broader struggle for economic democracy. Did you know I was starting to research more of this Florida 2000 thing, and I remember the big takeaways about the stolen election. But what I did not remember or maybe just didn't even know, which makes total sense, is that a Republican Senator, Kit Bond, I don't remember what state he was from, he used the Florida election to start introducing national voter ID laws. So not only did Republicans steal the election, they used it as an impetus to actually try to do some federal interventions in voting.
Right,
to make it harder for people to vote.
There was an awareness of where things were going, and that they needed to start suppressing the votes significantly.
And he would do events with a dog and a dead person, and he would say like, I love dogs and I respect the dead, but I don't want either of them voting.
That's right.
So anyways, that's happening Friday. ContraPoint is here for a special Friday episode. Patreon.com/TMBS, Patreon.com/TMBS, and of course, please go to both shows. We are selling at a very steady clip for the February 1st show at the Bell House.
Jamie, the Intifada.
All right, so out now, we have our episode with Jay Firestone, who wrote an amazing piece called 3 Months Inside Alt-Right New York about his secret mission infiltrating the alt-right and what he learned from it. We also just recorded a new episode with Pavlos Rufos, author of A Happy Future is a Thing of the Past, The Greek Crisis and Other Disasters. We talked to him about the Greek debt crisis, the rise and fall of Syriza, and how it shows the limitations of bourgeois electoral politics in confronting debt and austerity, whether he thinks that's even possible to do without confronting the wage system. We also talked about some good riot stories that he, all of which he observed from very far away. And I think that's going to be a bonus for our patrons, that last part.
Matt.
Yeah, Literary Hangover. We did the episode on the novel Hope Leslie. Don't be intimidated if you're not a fiction person, because it's about 75% about history, so you can just pretend like you read the novel. We're talking about one of the themes we're tracing is the hands-onness of the patriarchy in early colonial America. So, like, literally people writing during the Pequot War, like, I noticed a large and fair Indian woman. Can I just have her? And Winthrop being like, yeah, sure, you can have her. And those documents still exist.
Wow.
And it's pretty amazing, yeah, how much of their in governorship time was spent on basically putting domestic servants into houses that they took from the Pequots, and then they would trade the men to the Caribbean for slaves. So
right, material benefits.
Yep.
For their,
so in honor of Thanksgiving, you should check out the shows I'm putting out this month, guys.
All right, folks, I'm going to take a quick break, head into the fun half. Just a look forward, either tomorrow or Thursday. We're going to play an interview I just did with Marcy Wheeler last night. Catch us up. We're going to see what the developments are. At any moment, we could be seeing indictments unsealed, maybe not. Whitaker may be headed for a bit of a fall. We shall see. But either way, we'll play that because fascinating recap of what's going on. All right, quick break. Head into the fun half. 646-257-3920. See you there.
You are in for it.
All right, folks. 646-257-3920. See you in the fun half.
Are you ready?
Who sent us this?
Alpha males are back, boy is back, and the alpha males are back.
Just as delicious as you could imagine.
The alpha males are back, boy is back, and the alpha males are back.
Just wanna degrade the white man.
Alpha males are back.
I take all of it in my throat.
Alpha males are back.
Almost says what?
The alpha males are back.
You are a madman.
And the alpha males are back.
I am a total cunt. Can we bring back DJ Danerky's song, please?
Yeah, or a couple of them. Just put them in rotation.
DJ Danerky.
Well, the problem with those is they're like 45 seconds long, so I don't know if they're enough of a break for people.
That's fucking nonsense.
Hey, folks, reminder.
I do not have Parkinson's.
And the alpha males are
psych. Fuck 'em.
Almost says what? Almost says what?
bank. A hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank. Hell of a lot of bank. Hell of a lot of bank.
All lives matter. Have you tried doing an impression on a college campus?
I think that there's no reason why reasonable people across the divide can't all agree with this. Psych.
The alpha males are back, 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 back. And the Africans are black, 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 black African. And the alpha males are back, 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 back. And the Africans are black, 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 black.
When you see Donald Trump out there, doesn't a little part of you think that America deserves to be taken over by jihadists? Keeping it 100. Can't knock the hustle. Come on! Fuck them. Things I do for the bigger game plan. By the way, it's my birthday! Happy birthday to me, Jew boy!
I have a thought experiment for you.
And the alpha males are back, back. Africans are black, black. Alpha males are back, back. Africans are black, black.
Come on! Come on! Come on! Someone needs to pay the price for blasphemy around here.
I am a total pussy.
So this is interesting. There's two things that are going on right now that are somewhat unrelated on some level, although AOC is the thread. This is an occupation in Democratic leaders Nancy Pelosi's office, basically calling for efforts to fight climate change, for a new Green Deal, if you would. Strangely,
Green New Deal
attempted by Democrats and pressuring Democrats.
Fucking
and
sell
as
out.
you can see, AOC is in the office and encouraging them. Do we have sound on this?
It's so incredibly important. I've shared with you all, and I've shared my story that my journey here started at Standing Rock, and it started with everyday people doing exactly what you all were doing too. It was just standing with the Lakota Sioux, standing with allies, standing with indigenous tribes, because we don't have a choice. We do not have a choice. We have to get to 100% renewable energy in 10 years. There is no other option. The IPCC let us know that. And what I hope we all show is that this moment, and this is the rallying point, it's not just about confrontation, but in a way it's about real, meaningful unity behind our goals. That's what this is about.
That's great.
So a couple of things about this. One is sort of related. There's a lawsuit being brought against the United States by a bunch of young people that the Supreme Court last week said could go forward, suing the U.S. government essentially for failure to protect its citizens from climate change. But the value of having someone like AOC, and this may seem somewhat basic and obvious, but we would not have probably even read about that occupation of Pelosi's office was it not for the fact that she shows up there. Possible we would have had maybe gotten a press release, but there would have been no mainstream news coverage. That was from ABC.
No sizzle.
No sizzle, as it were. And it's not simply because she is a person who is involved in this. It's because she is a Congresswoman-elect. She is a Democrat, and she is willing to pressure the leader of her party and to do so in a public way. And that's the way that momentum and pressure builds on, in this case, the Democrats and the congressional caucus. And this is the way it builds. And AOC is going to be a pain in the ass to a lot of people in the leadership and the establishment, and there's not a lot they can do about it because she's going to maintain her seat. She doesn't need their money. I mean, these are all the constraints that they have, and she's already built, a small caucus of support within the House. So this is the way that you take power. Do it slowly. You build upon successes, and then you translate into into getting stuff done on issues. Now, it's just a question of urgency when it comes to the Democrats. How urgent are they going to be? How dramatic are the steps that are going to be taken, or at least proposed at this point? I mean, Democrats aren't in a position to implement this stuff, at least not on a federal level. Now, another story coming out of New York. Her AOC's district, she's in Congress, doesn't have a direct authority on this, but again, you read about it, she provides cover. She starts to shape the narrative in New York. As you know, Amazon has chosen. This is like an episode it's like an episode of The Bachelorette, right? Amazon has given us, what do? They give the flower or something like that, or the ring, the red rose. Amazon has given the red rose to a place in Virginia, essentially greater Washington metro area, and to Long Island City, Queens, has bequeathed, I guess, half a rose to each. That the new second Amazon headquarters will come to your state, New York. You're welcome, in exchange for up to $1 billion in tax incentives. Now, understand that, just want to be clear about this. When you give a company like that $1 billion, or any company, or any institution, frankly, $1 billion worth of tax incentives, you're costing the state $1 billion. Particularly, Long Island City, it's not like this is, we don't know what to do with this territory here. Maybe we should have farmland, or maybe, we're just going to, this is extremely valuable property.
Community garden.
Community gardens. Much more productive for the people of New York City.
Nationalized housing.
Well, you would actually still get benefits out of it. And to give $1 billion worth of tax incentives costs you $1 billion. And it's not, listen, I don't know what kind of jobs are going to be there, but who they're going to hire. If they bring in new people, all it's going to do is raise the cost of housing even more in a place that's already prohibitively expensive to live. And you're going to drive more people out.
I don't know if these figures are right, but someone was ballparking like a $40K per job subsidy for a $120K job is going to just drive up prices. You're subsidizing a rent increase for everybody.
Of course.
But also, enjoy paying $5 for a subway ride, pores.
Right.
Also, this is another thing. I got to just interject. This is where we can say, attacking rightfully Wisconsin and Walker for the Foxconn deal, and then a certain type of corporate-leaning liberal reveals it's like, oh, it's just the sort of brand identification. Like Foxconn is down market, Amazon's upscale market, but either way, you're just luring predatory corporations with our money.
Right, and and so there is a shift, though, because a year ago or 6 months ago, there was really not a heck of a lot necessarily that you could bring to bear. I mean, of course, that people will react and this and that, but now there's actually something that can be operable. Democratic Assemblyman Ron Kim announced that he's going to introduce legislation to slash New York's economic development subsidies and use the money to buy up and cancel student debt.
Dab on them haters.
It would halt any Cuomo administration offer of taxpayer money to Amazon. And, here's the implications of the past election. There's a real opportunity for this legislation to pass and to force Andrew Cuomo to start making the decisions, the uncomfortable decisions that he never wanted to make, which is why he supported and midwifed the so-called IDC, which is basically a way of throwing the Senate to Republicans, even though more Democrats had been elected in New York.
I'm sorry, just one fact check. I believe his name is Amazon Cuomo now.
Amazon Cuomo. Cuomozan. Oh, Andrew Amazon.
I am Amazon. I am the real estate industry. I am a Wall Street bank that wants anything, anytime, anywhere, any place.
Now, I mean, you have to look at the sort of the way that everything is building upon each other. When AOC comes out and says, we need to, put more stringent requirements on Amazon. We can't do this big tax giveaway. My constituents are very concerned that this is going to drive people out of the neighborhood. And of course it will, right? I mean, if you force Amazon to hire the people who already live in that area, that's one thing. But of course they're not going to do that. They're going to bring in more people. They're going to increase the pressure on housing. They're going to raise the rents for everybody around there. It's going to drive people out of Long Island City. And it's going to cost the taxpayer $1 billion to do so. And so when she starts being critical of this, it gives cover for a guy like Ron Kemp. He may have done it. Maybe he wouldn't have done it without her, I'm sure. But the bottom line is it just increases the pressure and raises expectations. And that's what has to happen across the board. Let's go to the phone.
Also, there's this report, which maybe we'll get to more later, but I'm just seeing now from the Independent. And this is, I guess this is already well dated, unfortunately, but there was a revealed in 2013, Amazon used neo-Nazi guards to keep immigrant workforce under control in Germany. So just another factoid on Amazon.
You're calling from a 210 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Good afternoon, Sam. It's John from San Antonio.
John from San Antonio. How are you, sir? Map's looking a little better, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
Yeah, Bernie's new book is coming out on November 27th. It's titled Where We Go From Here, 2 Years in the Resistance. So I got two questions for you. How long is the 2020 presidential boycott going to last? And if a potential major candidate such as Bernie or Warren announces that they're going to make a run, are you going to make an exception, and considering it'll be a major story and it'll have a strong historical impact?
Well, John, you got me. Listen, I will say that policies that are formulated here are never etched in stone. And I think you know that, John. We try and be flexible, of course, and react to the news and follow the news, particularly when it's completely unavoidable. And so we will take it under advisement. And yes, as people enter the race, we will talk about that. And as dynamics shift and deal with the race. But we're not going to start electioneering before the end of the lame duck. How's that?
Okay, that's fine. Okay, in the 45th District of California, the Progressive Campaign Change Committee endorsed Katie Porter as one of the best candidates in more of the tipping point districts and is now 0.4% within Republican incumbent Mimi Walters. Democrats usually send their mail-in ballots later than Republicans in California. So with every race you've seen is tightened towards the Democrats. So Porter's a consumer protection lawyer and a law professor who supports Medicare for all. Josh Harder is up by 1.8 points in the 10th District of California.
Let me just one thing about Porter so that people don't get, Porter is an interesting case. She is considered at least, sort of somewhat of a Elizabeth Warren protege. She, like you say, it's for Medicare for all. She's a consumer protection person. Also, during the general, was talking about cutting taxes for rich people. There was one other thing. So she has a mix of stuff. I mean, obviously, some of this is tailored towards her district, and California is turning more blue, and hopefully, but I just want to put a small flag there so that people, in 6 months, if she ends up being the congresswoman from the 45th district, that people aren't going like, what happened to her? People should be aware. This is how she campaigned as well. But go ahead, John.
Okay, that's fair enough. Democrat Josh Harder is up by 1.8% in the 10th district of California and will likely win this race. Harder supports Medicare for all, and hopefully he'll be a progressive. He'll have a progressive voting record on other issues. So, like, he was a hedge fund guy also. So, I mean, I'll throw my own caveat in. So, I mean, yeah, you're right. I mean, a lot of these people have mixed records. And, out of the, I think there were 431 Democrats that ran. I think there was 220 who supported Medicare for all. A lot of them were from, rural areas that ended up losing. But, I mean, the fact that they support Medicare all is a step forward, and so we got to try to get them to vote more progressively. So in Maine, the 2nd district, a district that Trump won by 10 points, incumbent Bruce Poliquin leads Democrat Jared Golden by 0.7%. He's down about a little less than 2,000 votes with 19 precincts, mostly Republican, yet to be counted. But the big question remains, can ranked choice voting propel Golden to a victory? This morning, Poliquin filed a lawsuit trying to overturn ranked choice voting. Rick Hassan tweeted recently, I'm a lawyer and I don't think much of the constitutional claim against ranked choice voting, and I think such a claim comes too late. The use of ranked choice voting is not a surprise, and its implementation rules have been available for a while. The 4th place finisher, William Hoare, is a special education teacher whose main issue is surprise education. I think most of his 7,000 votes will go to the second choice for Golden. 3rd place finisher Tiffany Bond is a former moderate Republican who's left the party, so her 16,500 votes are a little less predictable, but I think a majority will back Golden. So the Brennan Center for Justice came out on March 23rd this year called report called Extreme Gerrymandering the 2018 Election. Here's a quote from the report. To attain a bare majority, Democrats would have to win the national popular vote by 11 points. Neither Democrats nor Republicans have won by such an overwhelming margin in decades. Even a strong blue wave could crash against the wall of gerrymandering maps. I called in after that was announced, and I said, totally disagree with this opinion. I agree that gerrymandering had a big impact on states like North Carolina, Ohio, Texas, Michigan, and Wisconsin. And if every state put in similar maps to what Pennsylvania did earlier in the year, Democrats would gain 5 to 10 more seats. But the Brennan Center overestimated the impact that gerrymandering has on Democrats in the House. And in the summer, on a Sunday night, MSNBC had a special which promoted this distorted view about the Dems winning the House. And it showed that many of the people that you have interviewed on the subject, David Daley, Ari Berman, as well as Michael Lai, and they even had on Dave Wasserman from the Cook Political Report, but he didn't express his core opinion that natural sorting is more important than gerrymandering, which I don't agree with. I'm just saying that aggregators are very skeptical of this view because of the role of winning tight races and the differences between voting patterns between rural and urban voters, and that will decide who will win. When Mano mentioned the Brennan report the night before the election, I was extremely disappointed, and currently the Democrats lead by 6.5%, and it could up into 7.5%. And if you put in line with the 2010, where Republicans won 63 seats with 6.8%, in 2006, Democrats won by 8%, and they got 30 seats. In 1994, Republicans won by 7.1 and flipped 54 seats. So, what do you think about that?
So wait, so the point being that it was overstated the margin that you needed to win to pick up seats. Is that the point?
Yeah, the point. Yeah, exactly. I'm saying that of course they would have like in North Carolina.
North Carolina's
actually,
crazy. The Republicans got about 50% of the vote, maybe 50.1, and they won 10 out of 13 races. That's nuts. Right?
Yeah, I mean it's definitely not right. I mean, a judge actually told them to change the maps, but it was done so late that even the Democratic Party said, we've already had our primaries, everything's in place, we can't do this. If it had happened, let's say 4 months earlier, I think there would have been a difference in it, probably 2 to 3 seats. And, like I said, in all those other states. But I'm just saying that, it was obvious to me that it was an overstatement. But it doesn't mean that we shouldn't try to fight against gerrymandering. I mean, the fight is still, we should still try to do that. But I'm just saying, let's be realistic about, how much damage it actually causes. In a wave election, it wasn't the main factor. I mean, the main factor, was overcome by just the sheer number of votes that came out.
Right.
So.
All right. Well, I appreciate it.
In tight races.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
I appreciate it. Bye.
Okay. Thank you.
I felt that John was firm but fair with you in that.
I think so. We should get to this. We missed it yesterday. People are talking about this. Did some research, found out that it's real. It's not a fake ad. It's not a parody. It's not the Yes Men. We're playing it because it's nice to have a laugh. And look, here's the thing. If there's somebody out there who wants to invest in a possible business where we would try and target the audience that buys this thing, I think we should really think about it. I mean, it would be pretty easy to do, I think. We got to find out how much.
I'm all for that type of activity.
Now, you have to explain to me why this is so QAnon grounded. Oh, the storm. Right. Okay. Now, here it is. It starts off with the words, I am the storm. The storm is coming. And it's sort of a non sequitur with the rest of the thing. But
if you know the language, it speaks to you.
It speaks to you. If you are the storm, that means that you are part of the coming quasi-religious, semi-apocalyptic event that will be brought about when all is revealed, when it turns out Mueller has actually been working on behalf of Donald Trump.
Mar-a-Lago Gate.
And will indict, finally, Hillary Clinton for the server or something like that, or Vince Foster, or I am not quite up on it. But here is the ad. All of this sounds very foreboding, but it ends up being super cuddly.
Storm is coming. You cannot defeat the storm. I am the storm, the great American grizzly. Introducing the original Trumpy Bear. Just find the secret zipper and pull out the American flag themed blanket. Then wrap yourself in the red, white, and blue for comfort and warmth.
Pause it. Let's just
adorable.
Stop and think about this, how insane it already is. You're a storm. It's represented by a bear. We've moved from a ferocious bear to a cuddly bear with a disgusting toupee on it. But that's not all. The bear is not just something you cuddle with. It also is a receptacle for an American flag bed sheet that you then hop into and cuddle with the bear. I mean,
just how they
What's
wanted
the problem?
Is it
how high
possible
are
that
we
this
all
is a
now,
joke?
right?
Is it possible that this is a joke?
Reverse it. Just go back a little bit. I just wanted to just sort of ground everybody where we are. And if you can't see what we're talking about, it is as insane as it sounds.
And pull out the American flag themed blanket. Then wrap yourself in the red, white, and blue for comfort and warmth. Show your patriotism and proudly display Trumpy on any American holiday.
God bless America, and God bless Trumpy Bear.
Trumpy Bear loves to cruise with his brother.
I'm a former Marine, and I'm proud to have Trumpy Bear ride by my side.
When I ride with Trumpy Bear, he makes my golf game great again. Thank you, Trumpy Bear.
Simply style his trademark hair and place him in his favorite chair. Even the toughest guys will love Trumpy Bear. Order the Super Plus Trumpy Bear for only 2 payments of $19.95 and receive a special certificate of authenticity. Order now.
To order your Trumpy Bear, call 1-800-503-8106. That's 1-800-503-8106. Or you can go online at thetrumpybear.com. Order now.
There you go. And you get the certificate of authenticity.
And
that's what you're paying for.
That's right. Because you wouldn't want to get a knockoff version of that, obviously.
I'm going to sell knockoff versions of Trumpy Bear and then donate the money to, like, Rojava or something.
I just saw someone sent a screenshot, though.
Certificate of knockoff Trumpy Bear. What?
It's not from that ad, but it's from the same product. So there might be an outside chance that this is a joke.
Really?
I don't know who's coming.
Well, it's a grift at least.
It's
right?
definitely a grift, but if you look at this still, look at the name of that guy.
Corporal Frank Warholic.
Yeah, I don't think that's a real name.
Oh, it's a different one?
It's a different one.
I think what it clearly is they found a bunch of teddy bears with that compartment, and then they just found a bunch of those fake toupees and sewed them on, and now we can sell a bunch of bears.
But it's all a grift.
But
I heard
didn't
a
someone
joke
say they
recently.
saw it on on Fox News? It was
Yeah.
on Fox News advertising. I mean, that is the kind of joke. That's
Someone's
like
having a laugh.
That's like a John Benjamin joke.
Well, do you think you can actually get
I
one?
did that. I got it.
Yeah,
Isn't that if it isn't?
I just spent
$75,000. I'd love to help, but
That
I
would
just
be-
for a
spent
joke that no one was quite
200
sure was
grand.
a joke.
That would be
on
a very
Fox News.
well-funded joke.
That's what I'm saying. That is like a classic John Benjamin joke.
I mean, you could do it as a joke, but can you get one of these things, I guess, is the question.
I have no clue.
Because if you can, then it's not a joke,
Should
really.
we order it and then do something horrible to it on camera?
Probably.
Not if it's a teddy bear.
No, I'll do it.
That makes me sad.
I want to do something. I'll go in Prospect Park.
Yeah, I'm going to
Oh
sacrifice
yeah, you want
that bear.
Oh,
to
you mean
Satan.
like a little like some Prospect Park activity? Like we're gonna like
Santorini?
Like some Santorini. Yeah, that's what I was thinking. I will do it if it is part of a Santorini thing. To getting to 5,000 patrons, I will do it.
I will do an ISIS-style beheading video of this bear. How about that?
Stop trying to get on Kathy Griffin's lane. You leave her alone.
All right, let's just check back in with Hyde-Smith. This is Cindy Hyde-Smith. Now,
Real quick,
yesterday-
you guys know where to send this, just by the way, to the audience.
What's that?
If you're going to get a Trumpy Bear, I mean, you know what to do.
So yesterday we recounted how Cindy Hyde-Smith was at an event she is a candidate running in a runoff against Mike Espy. And this is, where is it? In Mississippi. And she was at an event with a rancher. She said, I like this guy so much, I would sit in the front row. He could invite me, and I'd sit in the front row of a hanging. Here she is saying this to her constituents.
I would fight a circle song for him if he invited me to a public hanging. I'd be on the front row.
Yeah, if he invited me to a public hanging, I'd be in the front row. And of course, one could only imagine who the public hanging would be. Maybe she was talking about like if he was to have, invited me to the Nuremberg trials. So I would have been in the front row.
A lot of ambiguity in the meaning there.
So, but, of course, we gave her some grief. I mean, obviously, people get used to using idioms. They say them in contexts, and then later they have the opportunity to apologize when they realize that that idiom might be offensive, or at the very least could be taken in a very offensive way, seeing as how she was running against an African American in the Deep South. So let's give her, Cindy Hyde-Smith, an opportunity to get up and apologize. Yesterday we played some dumb, sort of joke where we said, oh, here's the clip of her apologizing, and then crickets, and yeah. All right, well, it's time to grow up, folks. Here again, Cindy Hyde-Smith running for the U.S. Senate, and here is her apology.
Put out a statement yesterday, and we stand by that statement.
Could you expand on it then, why you said it, what you meant by it, and why people in the state should not see it as offensive?
We put out the statement yesterday, and it's available, and we stand by that statement.
Senator, are you familiar with Mississippi's history of lynchings?
I put out a statement yesterday, and that's all I'm going to say about it.
You mentioned that it shouldn't be viewed with a negative connotation. Could you at least explain
I put out a
how it
statement
could be
yesterday,
positive?
and we stand by the statement, and that's all I'm going to say about it.
Is that phrasing in your everyday lingo, in your vocabulary? Do you use
I
that
put out
phrase?
a statement yesterday.
Governor,
We
you
stand by the
appointed
statement.
her as a United States Senator. You have a huge black population that are looking for answers on why she used that kind of language. And you have worked to try to make it known that Mississippi no longer has that past. When you're hearing her say, I put out a statement yesterday, and that's all I have to say
I
about
think
it.
she
What do you
is,
say?
she's certainly addressing the fact that she has put out a statement. I can tell you all of us in public life have said things on occasion that we could have phrased better. When you make as many speeches as we do in public life, that does occur. But I know this woman and I know her heart. I knew it when I appointed her, I know it now. She meant no offense by that statement. There was nothing in her heart of ill will. Now, in a political campaign, people can make anything you say what they want it to say. They can spin it. They can go on social media and accuse you of all sorts of things.
Governor,
She feels certain that, I believe, I won't speak for her, but that her statement spoke to it. Absolutely, we have been sensitive to race relations in this state. I brought the President of the United States here to open the Civil Rights Museum.
Oh, wow.
And African-American leadership that would fail to even come to the event because the President of the United States was there. Today I talked about the genocide of over 20 million African-American children. You see, in my heart, I am confused about where the outrage is at about 20 million African-American children that have been aborted. No one wants to say anything about that.
Yeah, so there you have it. I mean, that is a really heartfelt statement that she made, which was to refer to my statement. And Matt, do you have the statement there for us to refer to? Because this is heartfelt stuff. Folks, if you're one of those people who get teary-eyed, I would get your hanky out.
Statement. In a comment on November 2nd, I referred to accepting an invitation to a speaking engagement. In referencing the one who invited me, I used an exaggerated expression of regard, and any attempt to turn this into a negative connotation is ridiculous.
That is so sweet and so heartfelt. And, of course, as you know, that is her statement. So that is
and they are
so special.
As someone just pointed out to me, there's a little visual cue here, which is interesting.
Oh, it's nice they're standing in front of, what is that?
They're standing in front of a rebel flag while all this is happening.
Is that the rebel
There it
flag,
is.
or is that the Mississippi flag?
It has the, oh, is it,
it's the Mississippi flag that has a little
includes the-
Confederate thing in the middle there.
Oh.
Look, here's what happens here, and this is what I think, this is, part of the reason why Trump won. Nobody's giving them credit for not having a noose up on that wall, right? It's everybody just ignores that like it's not, but nobody's giving them any credit for that.
That turned into a bitch fest about black ministers and community leaders not showing up for a Trump event.
Right, exactly.
Everybody should just take that into consideration.
That's pretty amazing
That's
progression.
Exactly
there.
how
After
that happened.
The governor
she
comes
means
in
to be glib about lynchings.
Also, social media, you can take things anyway.
Yeah.
So, like, when you
Yeah.
talk about public hangings, social media, that you think what they can do with that kind of language.
I also wasn't aware you could
Maybe
spit on these
if
people.
black leadership did not disrespect our white leader, maybe none of this would be a problem. So
exactly.
That's a major part of these people's brand, is refusing to apologize for culturally insensitive language. So they absolutely never would. I also like how they pivot from refusing to apologize for one kind of oppression to promoting another kind of oppression, aka, not letting people get abortions.
There you go.
Whoa,
Look,
that's the devil news. White news. White news. We call it the white news.
I like this guy so much. I'd be. He could invite me to an abortion. I'd be front row.
Call it bacon news.
There you go.
Yeah, might as well call it swine news. Yeah, that's the fake news. Nope, sit down.
Calling from a 781 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Trumpy Bear. Hey guys.
Ooh.
I'm just getting. I'm an Obama Trump voter, and I was just getting my Thug Life tattoo across my belly replaced with Trumpy Bear.
Hmm.
No.
No.
Oh man, I feel like the joke failed.
It did.
Oh boy.
That's all right.
Dab on them haters.
Goodbye.
All right.
Good day, sir.
I'll call back.
Goodbye.
another day.
Seriously? Okay.
Look at Sam's disappointed.
I mean, I was just like,
Sam's like, you don't have anything
I'm
more
gonna give
than
you the
that?
opportunity to come up with a call from a 610 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
That's the White Calls, White Line.
Hey, guys.
Yeah.
It's Mike.
Mike.
Oh, it's Mike.
PA.
Mike
How
from
are you?
Pennsylvania.
Oh, thank God.
Where have you been, Mike?
Well, I was running a campaign.
Oh, okay.
I was a little
excuse
busy.
us. All right. Wow. Oh. How did you do?
We lost just outside of a recount, 49-51. So, pretty tough.
Sorry
pretty
to hear
tough
that.
loss. We should talk more about it because it's a pretty interesting story. We had the only nationally endorsed Our Revolution candidate in Pennsylvania. So there was a big effort on both sides of the aisle to beat him. So they managed it. We even had a former chair of the Democratic Party endorsed the other candidate, the
Really?
Republican. So, yeah. It's a pretty crazy story. I could tell more about it, but pretty shocking shit went down. They spent more on this state Senate race than they did on the congressional race here, even though our congressional race was one of the top targeted races. So
why do you
I think they had like 25 pieces of mail sent against her, including they just made up whole cloth that our candidate didn't pay taxes. So we had to sue for libel, and then they had to take the ads down. But so it was pretty insane campaign.
Well, Mike, but why were Democrats afraid of a state Senate seat going to someone, presumably, right, the too far to the left for or was it the politics, or was it the not part of the sort of maybe the grift or graft network that they had established?
So, I think local effects probably predominated because we have this special tax zone. You were just talking about Amazon, but there's something that we have here in Allentown called the Neighborhood Improvement Zone, which basically just gives unlimited taxpayer dollars to a couple developers, and it pays down their debt so they can borrow money, and then the taxpayers just pay their debt and they keep what they bought. It's like an unprecedented tax scheme that we basically created a billionaire using taxpayer dollars. So there's obviously like a former state representative who's now a Democrat, who's now a tobacco lobbyist, also came out to endorse the Republican because he helped craft this neighborhood improvement zone, as is what it's called. I don't know if you remember, but we had our mayor of the city of Allentown was just convicted, and he went to jail in October on 47 counts of corruption surrounding this issue. So there was kind of like this, I hate to say, both party cabal locally.
Right.
And so it was pretty crazy.
Well,
pretty
I'm sorry
tough
to hear
race. Yeah. No, it's okay. The city of Allentown they're going to have like a big financial collapse next year.
Oh, that's good.
Us being defeated, but
okay.
So anyway, yeah. So I didn't mean to call about that. I just wanted
Okay.
to give you an update. It was a tough one. I needed to take a week.
I understand. Well deserved. Sorry you didn't win. So give us. So Pennsylvania, if I'm not mistaken,
Sure.
four pickups. Was that right?
So yeah, well, kind of. We were up at 6, and that's because Connor Lamb won that big, really Trump district out west. And with the new districting, he was headed against, I think, the chair of the House Freedom Caucus, Keith Rothfuss. And that was the only incumbent on an incumbent race in the entire country. And Connor Lane was able to be victorious, defeat him, and we picked up 3 more seats. Unfortunately, we lost the other progressive candidate who was running in Pennsylvania, Scott Wallace. In PA1 in Bucks County, he lost 51-49 as well. The AFL-CIO and the Democratic establishment endorsed basically the Republican, Brian Fitzpatrick there, which is kind of really interesting. Like, and not to go back to my race, but the teachers union actually endorsed the Republican, even though he supports voucher schools. Wow. And that's a really good question. I hate to get into this right now because my thoughts are not totally coalesced on this.
Right.
And I just want to spout without thinking deeper. But I believe that there's a strong effort to try to defeat progressives in the country. And it's sort of like when Planned Parenthood and they all endorsed Hillary, even though Hillary had spoke about banning late-term abortions. The policies didn't matter. It's more like you don't want to there's this kind of like lobbyist class, people that work as a professional lobbyist, and some of them work for supposedly progressive organizations, but they have, a class interest in defending kind of the status quo, the way things work now. And somebody like these progressives might kind of break down that lobbyist class influence. And so the gains in Pennsylvania were less than they might have been had the Democratic Party put all of their weight behind the, quote, Democratic candidates.
I will say this. I don't, my sense is in the context of the Clinton race, I think some of that may be the case, but I also think some of it was like, we're going to get in on the ground floor and support someone who we think is going to be the definite winner, as opposed to a race that's
what I used to think.
51-49.
That's what I used to think. After this year, I don't believe that anymore because there's really no excuse for endorsing Republicans in very close races.
Absolutely not.
What's the logic of the AFL-CIO endorsing a Republican over a progressive Democrat in a race that ended up 51-49?
Zero.
There is none.
Zero.
So, if you assume they have influence over 1 or 2% of the voters, which is probably an underestimation,
right?
They basically gave the win to the Republican.
Yeah, and the endorsement, people should know, it's not just a question of an endorsement. It's right. It's like how much of an effort. That's indicative of the effort that they're going to put in. I mean, sometimes you'll see an endorsement and they won't put any effort in, and so it's a hollow endorsement. But if they're actually going to go out of their way to make the endorsement, they're putting effort behind it.
Yeah, the AFL-CIO has a strong field program. They do paid communication to their members. And if you're a Republican, especially in one of these seats where they need Democratic votes, that gives them a path to victory because they say, well, I'm such a moderate, reasonable Republican, I even got the unions to support me. And it seems to be happening selectively against the most progressive candidates who are the most strongly in favor of stuff like the AFL-CIO.
Well, we should say that my understanding is that all of the Our Revolution candidates, except for Porter, we just mentioned her in California's 45th, lost. I think there was 9.
Yeah, I mean, I don't, Katie, I don't know what you're referring to with Katie. I'm a big fan of hers. I think she might have been referring to the the Trump tax cuts got rid of the local and state.
She was talking about. She was talking about the
so that hurts people from
California and New York.
States.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. So bringing that back actually would be good for progressives because it gives progressive states more fiscal flexibility to do things. And spend money without it being.
It's not fiscal flexibility. What it does is it decreases the political pressure to lower taxes. Yes, but I understand. But it is. I'm just saying it's a shift in the general election from where she was in the primary that people should just be aware of. I'm not saying that I think just it is an example of what she feels is necessary. It wasn't something she was pushing in the primary. Let's put it that way.
I mean, she is running in a seat that's never been won by a Democrat.
I just wanted to put people on notice. It's not one of those things you want to, that's, who knows? She maybe goes statewide. She goes back to her primary roots. I'm just putting it out there.
By the way, to keep it on brand, I want to disagree with John from San Antonio.
Okay.
Oh, really?
Gerrymandering is not underestimated. In Pennsylvania, for example, gave the Republicans a 21-point advantage in our seats until they struck it down. The geographic advantage is about 2 points, so that explains why you could say that the geographic advantage is why Fitzpatrick won that one seat. Whereas in prior races, they would win 4 or 5 seats they shouldn't have had due to the gerrymandering. And if you do it statewide, you're talking about like 15 to 20 seats, not 5 to 10. So in 2012, we would have had the House had there not been gerrymandering.
In 2012, the U.S.
The Democrats would have won the House, had they not been for the gerrymandering that had been completed in 2010.
What is Pennsylvania now, 9-9?
9-9, yeah.
Okay. All right, well, listen.
Even though, statewide we had a big win.
Hey, Mike, I got a question for you. How about I gerrymander my foot up your ass? Don't you ever question my political analysis again. And I was just wondering what you thought about that.
All right, well, Mike, look, get your thoughts in order, and let's have some of these extended conversations. Now you're sitting at home for a couple of days.
We should have an offline conversation, too.
Okay.
Because it's pretty insane.
All right.
Oh, it'll be offline. Don't worry about that.
All right, Mike, good to hear from you. Sorry things did not work out in your neck of the woods, but
and before you let me go, I want to thank the Majority Report because a lot of people from the community helped and supported Mark, the candidate, Mark Pinsley, and it really raised him to another level, and he got a lot of extra support nationally because of the Majority Report community supporting him early. So I wanted to thank you guys for all the help you had given me, and I'm sorry I let you down, but...
Well, you didn't let anybody down. Mike.
It was close.
But
we're all very disappointed in you.
I expected nothing different.
John from San Antonio had that race called. All right, thanks, buddy. Thanks.
Peace, buddy.
Calling from a 267 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay. Yes, this is Steve from Pennsylvania.
Steve from Pennsylvania. Are your thoughts about what happened in Pennsylvania divergent from Mike in Pennsylvania?
Actually, I am from Northeast Philadelphia, so I know exactly what Mike's talking about in terms of the lack of Democratic support from the state and even national level from the Democratic Party. I helped Wallace out, Scott Wallace, who ran in the 1st District against Brian Fitzpatrick. Fitzpatrick's a incumbent Republican who brands himself as a moderate, when in reality he, as usual, votes along with the Trump agenda, actually 83% of the time, I believe. So Wallace didn't get any support. He's actually the grandson of Henry Wallace, so he does come from money, but he did put a lot of his own money into the campaign. He had a lot of progressive policies. Didn't agree with him across the board on every single thing, but unfortunately he lost. I believe the final tally was, I think that's what Mike was talking about. I wasn't listening, but I think it was 51-49 or somewhere in there.
He said that Wallace did not get the AFL-CIO endorsement, didn't get the teachers' endorsement, didn't get support from national Democrats.
Brian Fitzpatrick, he took the seat from his brother, and he had the support from the unions.
Why?
And the Democrats just didn't they just didn't support. They just didn't come out for Wallace. I mean, Tom Wolf, took the governorship pretty easily, but you just didn't see. I mean, this was a district that was, it was flippable. I mean,
but
why
didn't the national? Why are the unions supporting Fitzpatrick? Why would they do that?
I don't know. And, for some reason, I mean, it just became, it just wasn't talked about. I mean, you never heard this district being talked about in terms of, the Democrats putting a lot of support towards it.
It's strange. So. Well, we're going to see if we can get some reporters on it to see if we can maybe dig up what the story, if there's another story behind there. It's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, Pennsylvania's still a pretty Democratic state overall, but, especially around the Philadelphia area. But, there was a chance there. I mean, this is a district that is mostly in the suburbs, and, you kept hearing during the campaigns about, these suburban Republicans that are in danger, and that fits the bill exactly for what this district is. So. But
what district again is that, Fitzpatrick?
This is in the 1st district.
Yeah. Okay.
So it's Bucks County outside of Philadelphia.
All right, I'm going to ask around about that. It sounds very strange to me why the union would do that. I'm curious about it.
And and on election night, I mean, they were, I was following MSNBC, I was following you guys and some other outlets, but you barely heard anything. I think Kornacki mentioned this district like once, towards the end of the night, but it's just, it just shows the strategy is just messed up. I mean,
well, I wonder what the story is. I'm going to ask some people, so we'll see. Steve, I appreciate the call.
All right, no problem.
Thanks,
guys.
Right. Calling from 314 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Sam, how's it going? This is Chris from Taiwan.
Chris from Taiwan. Are you calling from Taiwan?
I am not. I spent the last 2 months in the suburbs of Minneapolis working on my friend's State House campaign, and he won. So.
All right. Well, there. It's about time we got some good news.
Yeah, well, I believe that means my political career is more successful than Mike from PA's, doesn't it?
Whoa.
Not a big deal.
Jeez, that's not a big deal.
I think that was actually a little unfair.
I'm sorry. I like Mike a lot.
That's okay.
Dab on them haters.
Dab on them haters, Mike.
I want to share an anecdote from when I was working for my friend and try to make a larger point out of it.
Okay.
So I was making get out the vote phone calls to people we had identified as supporters or as likely Democrats, but who tended not to vote in midterm elections.
Right.
And I talked to this woman named Ann, who told me that she was not planning on voting until my friend, the candidate, came to her door. And she was so impressed with him, she decided to go to the polls to vote for him. And while she was there, she said she was going to vote for all the other Democrats on the ballot as well. And so since then, I've been thinking about this notion of coattails. We always talk about people turning out for candidates at the top of the ballot, and then as an ancillary effect, they vote for other candidates from the same party further down the ballot. But this woman got me wondering if there's any such thing as reverse coattails.
Yes, we saw that in Virginia.
How often?
We saw that in Virginia. You remember in Virginia last year, I guess it was, or whenever it was, the spring? Well, we saw all those state houses, state seats, state legislature seats in Virginia, and basically pushed the governor across the finish line because there were so many contested races and so many people came out for these races that you usually don't see this type of turnout. That is definitely a thing.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that makes a lot of sense because, one of the ways, one of the states that did really well was Minnesota. And I'm not going to name names, but I think some of the candidates higher up on the ticket were maybe not the most inspiring people. But, I met and volunteered for a number of these state house candidates, and a lot of them were just really impressive candidates running really good races. And I'm wondering, if there would be some way to measure that effect. And so I guess my point is that we should never underestimate the importance of small down ballot races and never just hinge our hopes on Senate candidates or gubernatorial candidates or even presidential candidates. That was sort of the moral of that story for me.
And I would add, not only is there dividends for competing in these state races in terms of that election and pushing people higher up on the ticket over the finish line, you're also building networks and and sort of. I mean, this is the whole theory behind the. On some level, on the 50 state election strategy, right? Like you don't know,
right.
You don't know what states may come into play, what seats may come into play in the future. I mean, some that are completely out of it, but and you build these things because if you get a wave, you want there to be an apparatus there to take advantage of it, and ultimately, momentum builds over a series of elections. So appreciate the call.
Yeah,
Chris.
absolutely. Hey, wait, can I say one more thing real quick? I have, on the subject of unions mysteriously endorsing Republicans.
Yeah.
In my race, one of the unions, the Carpenters Union, I'm their lawyer in one of the primaries, and my friend actually supported his opponent. And in the general election, they endorsed my friend's Republican opponent just as a way to get back at him. So sometimes there's interpersonal grudges and things that come into play as well. So that could be part of the explanation for the AFL-CIO in Pennsylvania or other.
Well, actually,
I don't know. You never know what's going on behind the scenes.
I already got an answer on that. I appreciate the call, Chris. I'm going to read it right now. All right. I just got on the hotline with David Dayen, who happens to be from Bucks County. That's where his family lives anyways. And he pointed me to the Inky, as they call it. First district, exactly the kind of moderate suburban district Democrats hope they can turn blue this fall. But Cook Political Report recently went from describing the race from a toss-up to lean Republican, and it is because of Fitzpatrick's support from unions. This, of course, was written before the election. Fitzpatrick, freshman GOP lawmaker, has sided with Democrats on some key issues. Said he's extremely disappointed by a recent Supreme Court decision weakening unions. That would have been the Janus case. Has raised more than $200,000 from labor groups, according to Open Secrets. It also won the official endorsement of the Pennsylvania AFL-CIO. This is an alliance of 45 unions across the state. This is from August of 2018. It's 190 plus candidates backed by the group. Only 13 are Republicans. He's received nods from the Pennsylvania State Education, from AFSCME, among others. I'm not quite clear on why he garnered all of that union support, but my guess would be that maybe there's a strategy of trying to, I don't know, have a bulwark against hedge your bet against it. I don't know. Labor movement is not a party. It's a movement, said Rick Bloomingdale. If you're for us, we're for you. And he's been with us, so we're with him. Now, this to me, this type of thinking seems incredibly short-sighted. Because, now maybe the House doesn't control the Supreme Court, but to the extent that you're going to get any pro-labor federal regulations coming out, it's only going to be because you have a massive margin in the House. But one of the first things he did when he won was to reach out to organized labor about having a partnership, said the president of the AFL-CIO. You got to respect that when it comes from somebody after they didn't endorse him. So it doesn't make sense to me. He's voted with Trump 83% of the time. vote for the tax plan. This is president of the Neshami Federation of Teachers. Was against Fitzpatrick. Wallace's backers also said the National AFL-CIO gave Fitzpatrick only a rating of 47%. I mean, there's a lot of transactional stuff. I'm not quite sure I understand it.
Unions can be pretty conservative sometimes. And, like, that's not to say that the rank and file members are necessarily conservative, although they can be. Like, some unions are badly in need of more democracy. And that's one reason why, I guess, not just leftists, but even progressives need to get involved in unions, whether they're in a union and they need to get active in their union, or maybe you're looking for a job. I realize this isn't an option everywhere for everyone, but it's super important. It's super important. And the DSA is doing kind of a version of Kim Moody's rank and file strategy right now, in fact, where we are helping, especially younger members, because a lot of people in DSA are super young and looking for a career, trying to help them get good union jobs and get politically involved as well.
It's called a win-win. Win-win
Hell yeah.
situation.
It's called a win-win-win.
Time for 2 more calls.
That's actually a great idea.
Calling from a 266 area code. Who's this? 266.
Hello?
Hello?
Is this me?
Yes, it is you.
Hi. Okay, hi. My name is Dan from Ontario.
Dan from Ontario.
Yeah. If I could just, would I be able to talk about that should we be socialist panel that you had?
Oh,
sure.
No.
Sure.
Okay. All right.
Why everybody's groaning around here.
Sorry. Pretty much there's 2 things that I would say that
bias.
I heard that was pretty interesting. One was, I think the first person was describing their position with regards to socialism. They said that they didn't know where they fell. They were for government doing things like healthcare, prisons, but they didn't want government to do things like making shoes, for example. They thought that the private sector made shoes better. And to me, this is kind of like tangential to what most socialists think about socialism. They see that it's not governments or private companies that make anything. It's workers. And so it's kind of an abstraction that I think a lot of liberals make. Yeah, that's why they're for workers. Like maybe if they saw how those shoes were made, by those workers, they could consider being a socialist. I don't know.
I don't know.
That's
I mean,
a
I
good
think
fucking point.
I don't remember, who it was that said that. I sort of feel like it was maybe Pac-Man. No.
It was Anna Kasparian.
It was Anna Kasparian.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I mean, I think like
I didn't want his name.
Easy. Okay. Why? Well, why? It was public. I mean, it's not.
Okay.
But
all right.
I think that I would bet her argument, and we didn't exemplify it. I mean, we didn't sort of tease it out, but I would bet her argument is like, I want there to be competition with shoes, and the implication that if the government is, making shoes and has a monopoly on making shoes, that there's only going to be one kind of shoe. And I think that's probably
the
concern.
fresh to death comrade. What?
Yeah, I don't
That's what
want
I'm
the
saying.
government to make shoes either. I want the workers to direct their own circumstances in making the shoes.
Yeah, I think
as long as it's still Puma.
When you think of it as isms, it becomes too depersonalized. So think of it as who's making the ultimate decision about production. Is it a capitalist or is it some sort of democratic body? And the latter is socialism, the former is capitalism.
So the idea would be like you would have plenty of entities that are making shoes that compete with each other, just happen to be cooperative ones owned by labor.
There are different visions of socialism.
I would listen.
I mean, in mine,
in
there would be no
Jamie's,
currency.
no shoes.
If you listen to, there's no. No, but I think also, Hunter Motz and I had a conversation on basically why innovation is a group activity. and just even decoupling the notion of sort of like singular genius or singular entities generating innovation. Innovation actually happens in a highly social and public way. And it easily can be redirected, whether you're talking like things that happened in Brazil under Lula and Dilma for public health that were public innovation driven, or the more, radical ends as well. But decoupling innovation from competition and innovation from specific capitalism, I think is an important for us to do.
Oh yeah, innovation definitely needs to be redefined, because under the system we have now, not all innovation is created equally, right? Like there's no reason why you should have something like planned obsolescence that does not benefit consumers or people whatsoever, only to make money for the companies, right?
Oh, tell me about it. My computer drove me crazy.
Well, think
today.
of how much money has been in finance and what's the best financial innovation we've had in the last 30 years.
Right.
It's just the ATM, basically.
All right. Well, Dan, what's the second part of your question, which when you first introduced elicited a lot of groans and moans from some chatty Cathys around here?
I'm into it.
It was the white phone calls. White phone calls.
All right. The second part was Bakari Sellers. He said, having served as an elected official, he approved a multi-million-dollar package because you can't get better schools if you don't have these big companies coming in, which is, true, but that's true under capitalism. Under socialism, you don't have to grant big gifts to private companies to get your needs met. So again, I don't know why he used that as a point against socialism. He should have used that as a point against capitalism.
Right. Well, I mean that is sort of the central dynamic of neoliberalism as a practice, right? It creates the problems. The market creates the problems, and then the market solves the problems. It's like a self-licking ice cream cone.
I know just what you need.
Maybe a win-win, would you say?
There was
for them?
It's like a win-win-win-win-win-win-win.
Can't get sick of winning, folks.
This even came up with Joseph Cirincione in the context of arms control and disarmament. And I mean, it's obvious, but it's still just stunning that he's also like, and part of the reason is that there's a huge market infrastructure around maintaining these weapons.
Of course.
I mean, it's obvious, but it really just shows you the logic to the point. It's quite literally easier to imagine the end of the world than the end of capitalism.
Right.
It distilled in that example.
Well, Dan, I appreciate the call. It stimulated a lot of conversation. I would just recommend in the future you don't lead with "you're from Canada," and then maybe you won't get the groans.
Okay.
Appreciate the call.
All right. Cool.
Canada's not sending us their best.
That was 2 calls, correct?
That was a good call, but
that was 2 calls.
It was 2 calls.
All right, folks.
2 calls.
I never even opened up my IM.
Don't take the extra calls.
Oh, but let's just do this from this. So good for this guy Jordan Blue, right? This is the kid. So this is pretty nuts. This is Baraboo, Wisconsin, ladies and gentlemen. Let me just say this before we click to this. About, I don't know, close to 12 years ago. I don't know when it is. We'll play it soon, actually, because we're coming up in the season. I was invited on CNN to debate with the head of Women for America, a guy named Bob Knight. The Concerned Women for America, who's head of the organization, was a guy named Bob Knight. And at that time, they couldn't find a woman to lead.
I'm concerned.
This was.
I got the concerned part. This is not the woman part. I'm concerned.
This is all the way back in the aughts.
He was the greatest ally ever.
And he was on. We were having, I guess, a debate about the war on Christmas. And he brought up, I think it was a school in Wisconsin, where they were not singing, they were not using the name Jesus in Silent Night. They had changed the words or something. Now, of course, they had done this like 5 or 6 years earlier, and it was one school.
What did they change the words to? Like Earth
old,
Mother Night or
Old
something?
Cold Night or something. I don't know what it was.
Thank you, Mother Earth.
And, yeah. And
Say it, children.
He he was, you cherry pick these things, and his argument is like, this is a slippery slope. Yes, it's only one school that is saying this, but the concept of a slippery slope in and of itself is not sound in a vacuum, right? It's a function of like, how much of a danger if we head in this direction? How likely is heading in that direction? What are the trends that are going on? So it's one thing to cherry pick something and say, hey, this is a real problem. What are the contexts that are leading to this? Are we seeing other things in society that are creating an environment where something like this happens? And therefore, is it dangerous? Back in the Air America days, we would talk about state lawmakers who were introducing all sorts of crazy bills, and I remember we would get criticized by journalists like, you can find that guy, who's introducing that crazy bill that like fetuses can feel pain, in Iowa or Indiana or something like that, but that's never going to be law unless, of course, and then of course it is. Then you have like full states, legislatures voting on it, and maybe it getting vetoed by a governor sometimes, maybe not. So with all of those caveats said, here is a picture from Baraboo, Wisconsin. These are high school students at the local high school, and I don't know if Baraboo is this an official account? I don't know if it is.
I don't think it was an official city account. I'll look here.
I'm trying to find my story on it. I have it right.
Oh, it calls itself a parody account of Baraboo. So we all did a Baraboo City, Wisconsin parody account. So that's what originally posted this. Now the tweets are protected.
I see. Interesting.
Seems like a good idea.
It's a protected parody account.
Lori M. Muller, the Baraboo School District Superintendent, wrote to parents on Monday saying the photo was taken last spring. She said it was not taken on school property or at a school-sponsored event, but others in the community said the photos were associated with the school's junior prom. All these kids are dressed in a suit. Let's take a look at this picture. Can you get it up? There are a ton of kids. And they're all giving the Nazi salute.
Almost all.
Whoa. They're engaging in an open exchange of ideas.
That's right.
Be a little respectful.
Jeez.
And it is all at the thing. Now, there's one or two kids who are not. And one of them is this kid up in the far right of the frame. And his name is his name Jordan Blue?
Yep, and I retweeted him on Twitter recently. He's on Twitter.
Okay, and he didn't salute. And we have apparently he posted something as to an explanation of this. Is that right? One parent called the Baraboo high school environment stifling. There were a lot of Confederate flag tattoos and people throwing the N-word around, but there wasn't a super diverse population at the time. This is someone whose kid went there in 2012. And here is Jordan Blue. He posted, apparently this picture just went live in the past day or so, and so he posted this yesterday. My name is Jordan Blue. I'm the boy captured in the photo to the far right. The photo was taken during our junior prom photos. Clearly, I'm uncomfortable with what was happening. I couldn't leave the photo as it was taken within 5 seconds. The photographer took the photos, telling us to make the sign. I knew what my morals were and that it was not to salute something I firmly didn't believe in. I attended BHS, that's probably Baraboo High School. These classmates have bullied me since entering middle school. I've struggled with it my entire life and nothing has changed. These are the boy of class of 2019. Nothing has been done, and my question is, with anything, and I think it's supposed to be, will anything ever be done? I truly and firmly believe we need to make a change to this horrible act. It needs to stop. Bullying, immaturity, and just taking things as a joke. And look, the bottom line is, when the President of the United States gives some tacit approval for this stuff, it starts to infect the society. And I imagine the majority of these kids, maybe it's a hope, but I believe it's the case, will look back on this and feel some regret as they get older and understand the implications. But not all of them. This guy right here, he's, flashing the white power sign.
Can we never get another blog about how that's not technically a white power symbol after this? Is it just a coincidence that he's throwing that up as everyone's sig-heiling?
Right. I mean, but the idea that they're not, that it's, that it's even like we're at the point where they could do this as a joke without context. Like, I mean, I get, like, look, I've watched the Springtime for Hitler and and the producers. It's hilarious. But this is not that joke. This is, look what we can do.
Yeah, like, what's the joke?
Right.
They don't leave any ambiguity there. When they say we even got the black kid to throw it up, which, by the way, it doesn't look like he is. I'm not sure. But it's clear they know exactly
Right.
what they're doing.
Right.
Yeah, it's hard to see.
The joke is, look what we can get away with. And that's the way these things progress. So, real problem. All right, folks. That's all the time for today. We'll see you tomorrow.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught between the truth and the light bar, but finding out won't make me feel any better. Yeah, I know the clock is ticking, but the meds are gonna kick in, and my pilot light shining bright. I get somewhere the choice was made, for the option where you don't get paid, for the road that bends before it finally breaks you. I guess somehow I lost my drive